Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very unusual show planned for you this evening, which I know that you're going to be fascinated by. The title of our program is Power Diplomacy, Crisis, and Consuls, the role of the U.S. embassies in the Asia-Pacific region. And actually, we're going to be a little broader than that. We'll be talking about the role of our embassies and our foreign service globally. And we're very fortunate to have with us in the studio today two former ambassadors, James Moriarty and his wife, Lauren Moriarty. And are you ever a former ambassador, or you're once an ambassador, always an ambassador, right?
Retired ambassador.
Retired, okay. All right, for purposes of this program, though, if you will allow me, because I know both of you, I'd like your permission to dispense with the ambassador title, and I'm going to call you James and Lauren. Can we do that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Everybody else does.
All right.
Jim, I like Jim.
He likes Jim. He likes Jim. And the reason is, if I say Ambassador Moriarty, we get this two-part harmony coming in here. So rather than do that, we'll just go with the informal names. But ladies and gentlemen, this couple is the foreign service power couple here in the Hawaiian Islands, and both Jim and Lauren have had very distinguished careers with the State Department as foreign service officers. Jim served as an ambassador in Nepal and later in Bangladesh, and he has also served very senior positions in U.S. missions in China, in Taiwan, in Pakistan, and in Africa. And I'm not going to mention the countries in Africa because there probably are several. Am I correct?
There are Morocco, Swaziland, etc.
It's a long list and a very, very distinguished career. And Jim is now a private consultant in the international field, if I'm
In the
not
international
mistaken.
field, working with both government and business.
So we have the benefit of that experience. And then sitting right next to me here, this lady is a local girl from Hawaii. This is Lauren Kahea Moriarty. And Lauren went to the University of Hawaii, and she's a UH girl, and she has also had a very long, distinguished career as a U.S. diplomat. And Lauren has lived and worked in East and Southeast Asia. She has been in China and Taiwan and Thailand, and about 7 years, I think, in Southeast Asia. So that would be in Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan.
Yes.
And then, interestingly, from 2003 to 2005, Lauren was our U.S. ambassador to the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. Is there another word there? It's APEC something.
It's APEC.
It's APEC.
Asia
And
Pacific.
actually, one of the interesting questions is, should it have a noun afterwards?
Yeah, like organization or thing or something like that. Okay, but she was our APEC ambassador for several years, and so this couple has raised children in various parts of the world and dealt with the trials and tribulations of being in the foreign service and representing our country. And before I get started, let me just thank you for your service to our country these many years. And all too often our civilian diplomats do not get the recognition that they deserve for the hardships that they have endured for their lifetime. So thank you so much for that service to our country.
Thank you.
Thanks for those kind
Thank you.
thoughts.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are broadcasting this show at the time or the week of the almost unprecedented closure of 19 embassies in cities throughout the Middle East and Africa. And the 500-pound gorilla in the room is the terrible loss of Ambassador Chris Stevens' life in Benghazi in Libya. And our embassies are now closed as this broadcast is being made. And this is a show where we will not be talking about Benghazi. We're not going to be talking about the National Security Agency. what the nature of the intel was that caused those closures. But I would encourage you, if there are parts of this program that you find interesting or compelling, you can join us here on the Wall Street Business Network by calling us at area code 808-296-5467. That's 808-296-5467. But what we want to talk about, and what we want to show you or illustrate to you, that there are thousands of men and women serving the United States in U.S. embassies and consulates all over the world, and many of them on a daily basis put their lives on the line, just as our military often do. But they play a very different role, and that is a crucial role in the success of American foreign policy, the economic growth of the United States, national security, and of course international relations. And to more effectively enable you to understand this role that they play, and what happens on a daily basis, we're going to get Lauren and Jim to help us with this exercise here. Is that fair? Make
Sounds
sense? Well, let's talk about, go right from the news point first of all here. What's your reaction to this closure of embassies? Done before? New? Bother you?
I'll take part of that question. I think Lauren will take part of that question.
Okay.
Not completely new in the sense that we have closed embassies, for example, at the beginning of both of the Gulf Wars after 9/11. It is different in that those were precautionary closings. This appears to be closings that were mandated by a specific intelligence threat, even if it's a very broad threat. So it is different from previous mass closings of U.S. embassies.
What's your reaction, Lauren?
I was the director for East African Affairs on 9/11. So among the countries I was responsible for were Kenya and Tanzania, where Al-Qaeda had previously blown up our embassies, and Uganda, where they had tried to. And we did have information that they might be targeting. And so we faced some of the same questions at that time. Do we close our embassies? Do we draw down staff? Do we send families home? Those are always difficult questions. You want to protect people, you don't want to lose lives.
Well, what's the problem with closing an embassy? I mean, you do it just for security reasons, right? Is there a downside to closing an embassy? You got your staffs, in theory, safe. Everybody's protected. What's the downside?
I think there are two downsides. The first is the United States, when it closes an embassy, loses its eyes, ears, and voice on the ground in a foreign country. You can't find out what's happening, and you can't influence and speak to people. And secondly, depending on why you might be closing, there may be an impact, for example, on the ability of Americans to do business in the country, to travel. So you would only want to do it really under a circumstance where you felt it very important.
Okay, you've given the broad downside. Let me ask you specifically, what's your reaction to this closure that's taking place now? Do you support it? Do you think it's the right thing to do?
I don't have the access to the intelligence on which they base this decision. So I would hope and assume that those who made the decision made it with the best information and the best intentions. I personally feel that we should almost never close an embassy. Protect our people, but basically we need to be out there on the ground, seeing and hearing what's happening and talking to people.
Jim, let's take a step back now with that. I mean, thank you for that, Lauren. I think that's it's a very very thoughtful perspective. But let's take a step back now for our viewers and our listeners, and let's talk about the Foreign Service generally. What are we talking about in terms of size?
We're talking about 7,800 officers, a number of specialists. The way many people in the Foreign Service put it is that there are fewer Foreign Service officers than there are members of military bands. So it's a small group.
Fewer Foreign Service officers than members of military bands.
Yes.
And that's the whole global reach.
At 260 embassies and consulates around the world. And of course, with nearly half being resident in Washington, trying to work policy from the Washington end.
Lauren, can you help the audience, for those who have never had an opportunity to visit an embassy? What is its function? What is its role? What is it like?
There's two primary roles. The first role is to protect American citizens and U.S. property abroad. And the second role is to advance U.S. interests by communicating, two-way communication. So, representing or providing foreign input, what's happening on the ground, for U.S. policymakers, and then once U.S. policy has been made, representing the U.S. government, people, and values to foreign governments and people.
Okay, and that's in addition to all the kind of the more mundane things that we think of, the visa approvals for foreign nationals coming into the U.S. and some American gets sick in Jakarta and needs some help, or there's a criminal investigation and somebody's charged with a crime or thrown in jail.
I would say that even those things are precisely going in the same direction, in the sense that you are serving the American people, you are the main interface between a society and America. If you're sitting there as a consular officer giving out visas 16 hours a day. We don't work them 24 hours a day, but in places like Lagos or the big visa, Manila, the big visa mills, it's very hard work. And for a first tour junior officer to keep a smile on their face and to be able to say no 140 times on a given day and have the people go away and say, you know, didn't get the visa, but that wasn't a bad person I dealt with. I can understand why he said it. It's so important in terms of the communication between our country and the people of the other country.
We will have more when we come back after the break. We'll be talking further with Ambassadors Moriarty's. Is that correct? Or Ambassadors Moriarty?
Jim and Lauren.
Jim and Lauren. We'll be talking with Jim and Lauren more when we come back after the break, and we're going to get into more precisely what is it that they did in their careers that they look back on that is so significant. So I hope you'll stay with us, and we'll see you on the other side of the break.
This is ThinkTech, broadcasting on Ustream and Spreaker both day and night, doing our thing on OC16 and Alelo, and uploading videos all over YouTube. See the links on thinktechhawaii.com.
We're in the midst of a fascinating conversation with Hawaii's leading foreign service power couple, Ambassadors James and Lauren Kahea Moriarty, local girl there from UH. And Jim and Lauren, nice to have you back with us. Before we continue our discussion here, I want to bring the CEO of ThinkTech on board with me. Jay, are you there?
Yes, I am, David. Thank you. This is actually totally appropriate for your discussion with the leading foreign service power couple, who I dearly love, Jim and Lauren Moriarty. And maybe they could be interested in coming to our August 22nd ThinkTech Hawaii Venture Capital Association program.
What's that going to be all about?
Oh, it's called Don't Be Afraid to Send Your Kid or CEO to China. And the subtitle is Stories of Daring Do and of Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness in the People's Republic. I mean, we want to make the point that, you can actually live there.
Right.
It's not all corruption.
Right.
It's not all hacking and spying and evil economic competition. It's not all dumping on civil rights and human rights and mistreating dissidents. You can actually have a life in China, and a lot of people do. And we have a handful of them who are here that are, American, in fact, Hawaii people that have spent substantial periods in China. We have Brenda Foster, used to be the president of the Chamber of Commerce, the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. Her husband, Larry Foster, who was practicing law for a Shanghai law firm. He's going to be the moderator. Russell Liu, an attorney who practiced here and now practices with a firm in Beijing called Shepard Mullen. We have Shackley Raffetto, who is a good friend of mine. And
He's a former judge from Maui, right?
Judge in the Second Circuit here in Hawaii. And when he retired, he decided he'd go teach judicial procedure in a law school in Beijing. We have Nikki Shishido, who worked for DBED for quite some time in Beijing. So this is really an interesting crowd, and tell us their stories of daring do and how they got along fine, and life day to day. Do you take the bus or the train? Where do you shop? What do you do with the neighbors? How do you treat people in the street? So this ought to be really interesting for people who might actually go to China. We want to encourage kids and people in general from Hawaii to go in China, make their, go west, young man or woman, and see what you can do in China, because it wouldn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. It's like chicken soup. It doesn't hurt. Anyway, so come down on August 22nd to the Plaza Club. If you want to sign up in advance, might be a good idea. Go to the website of the Hawaii Venture Capital Association, hvca.org. I hope I see all you guys there.
Well, Jay, I want to thank the anonymous donor to ThinkTech who has been delivering that case of Red Bull every day. And I noticed that it has really taken a nice effect on you, and you're able to cover 2 hours worth of material in about 18 seconds. So we'd like to thank that donor.
It's you guys. You guys are the Red Bull. You know what I mean? You, David, and the power couple.
We are the Red Bull of the Foreign Service here. And speaking of the Foreign Service, back to our topic here, Lauren and Jim. Let's talk about the different kinds of Foreign Service officers. So, Jim, what do we got here?
Well, we already talked about consular officers.
Those are the passport stampers.
Passports, visas.
Okay.
Admin officers who make the embassies run, make sure that the people have their supplies, that we're paying our bills, that necessary buildings get built. Public diplomacy officers who do exactly what it sounds like. They give the message of the United States out. They do cultural affairs. I was a political officer.
What is that?
That's an officer who takes care of the political relationship in the broadest sense between the United States and the host country. For example...
That's what we would think about when people normally think of a diplomat, somebody who's going to go knock on the door of the president of a foreign country. And
I would agree with you
Or
completely,
scream
but
at
I wouldn't say it.
ministry.
I wouldn't say it in front of Lauren. A lot of it, yes. Issues like human rights, as you just mentioned, non-proliferation, arms control, domestic politics, bilateral relations, multilateral relations. Those are political topics. But economic officers argue that they do a lot of very important bilateral and multilateral work.
Well, and Lauren, you were for many years an economics officer, and so what is that? What is that role?
Well, it is interesting when you said that normally people think of political officers.
Well, it's
but
true. I think it's true. I'm being honest.
But it's true. My first tour in Beijing, I don't think I went to the foreign ministry for the first 2 years I was there. I was usually at the central bank, at the trade ministry,
Okay.
at the Ministry of Finance, doing things like double taxation,
Well,
avoidance treaty.
but before you get into it, this is a role, Jim, this economics officer. This is a function within the Foreign Service that I am sure that the public does not either understand or appreciate, and it is extremely critical for the interests of the United States and U.S. business and the ability of citizens to work smoothly in a country. So having said that, Lauren, what is it that an economics officer does? With that as your intro.
Well, let me give you a couple of examples. If there were a plane flying into the United States
Okay.
and it was unidentified, what might we do if we didn't know it was coming?
Take it down.
Right. So one of the things I did is I negotiated agreements with foreign countries on governing civil aviation relations between our countries, including, for example, an open skies agreement that allowed the market to determine how many flights there'd be between our countries and what the prices would be
Okay.
and where they could land.
Okay.
But we agreed as countries that we weren't going to shoot each other's planes down, we were going to allow civil aviation.
You know, that's something that, that's a simple concept that people take for granted unless they've heard this program and say, wow, there was somebody who actually orchestrated that. It just didn't happen magically.
Right. Another example is if most people look at their clothes, they're probably wearing something that was produced somewhere else. Well, somebody, usually involving a diplomat from an embassy and working with the U.S. Trade Representative's office, negotiated the agreement by which that entered the United States. It might have been a textile agreement. It probably included what kind of customs duties might be paid and the customs treatment. It might have been just agreeing we'd follow international norms on something, but somebody had to negotiate all of that and wanted to, and then you would want your negotiators to understand what's happening in the markets there and at home to get the kind of deal that would benefit our consumers in the United States and our businesses in the United States.
So we've got economic officers, we've got cultural officers, we've got political officers, we've got commercial officers who are there to assist U.S. business and U.S. exports. What else? Have we missed anything?
Oh, there's environment science and technology officers. There are refugee officers in some embassies, drug and narcotics officers. And you would also have often people from other agencies who would be working with the State Department officers as part of a country team concept.
What is the country team?
You want to talk about that?
A U.S. embassy overseas usually has a variety of agencies and offices. You know, the Defense Department will be represented.
Okay.
You'll have defense attaché. In many posts, you'll have a CIA station. In many posts, you'll have Foreign Agricultural Service. You have agencies, USAID, Agency for International Development in a developing country. These various agencies are sent out by their home ship, their mothership, to do the agency's work. But the work of an ambassador is to shape these people from different backgrounds into one team that looks at the host country and says, okay, how do we all work together to get maximum benefit in improving U.S. relations with this country and in best advancing U.S. interests here?
You know, having painted this wonderful picture of the various functions that you would find within an embassy, when we come back from the break, what we'll do is talk a little bit about how do we deal with these competing notions of security and access in the U.S. embassies abroad. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back after the break. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard of Kumukuhui Theater, and when I was young I used to love watching Charlie Chan movies on Family Classic TV on Sunday afternoons. Our show at Kumukuhua that runs from August 22nd through September 22nd is called Will the Real Charlie Chan Please Stand Up? It's written by Nancy P. Moss and takes place right here in Chinatown. I really hope you'll come in and watch it. You will love it. It's everything about the movies that you loved and more. Go to kumukuhua.org to get more information and your tickets. We'll see you there.
Back, we're live. You can join the conversation by calling us at area code 808-296-5467. This is Pacific Forum's Issues and Insights, and our program today involves two illustrious former U.S. ambassadors, Jim and Lauren Moriarty, and we're talking about power, diplomacy, crisis, and consuls in the week in which 19 embassies in the Middle East and Africa have been shut down. And right at the break, I raised the point that I kind of like Lauren, would you to take on this question, and that is, how do you balance the post 9/11 wall up of embassies for security to provide protection for our foreign service officers operating in sometimes some very scary places abroad, with the need for openness to have access to the population and for the local population to have access to the Americans in the embassy? How does that work?
Maybe think about it like the family of a policeman might think about it. Policemen face risky situations every day, but if they're not out on the street talking to people, seeing what's happening in the neighborhoods, they can't do their jobs. And the families of policemen also, and the policemen themselves, learn that they accept certain risks in getting their jobs done. So, for example, we have two children, and they grew up from the time they could walk and talk, knowing where their passport was and who they would go to if their parents were captured or killed, kidnapped or killed.
Age, how old?
2.
2 years old, they could talk, they could walk, and they knew that mommy and daddy could be killed, and that if circumstances were scary, I needed to go somewhere and get something and go to the neighbor's house, something like that?
Yeah, right.
Yep, they knew that there was what we call a go bag with all the important documents, and it was actually fairly big, but it had
With
wheels, and they had to pull it over to our next door neighbors, a very nice American couple, and go there and wait for instructions.
She
You know,
was
this-
a Pakistani-American doctor, and in the bag were things like their passports, cash in different currencies they might need, bank records, addresses, and various pieces of information you might need to put your life together again somewhere else, if that's all you had.
You know, I think it's important, ladies and gentlemen, that you appreciate what Jim and Lauren are saying here, and that is that the two of you raised a family abroad, young kids, with the understanding that mom and dad could be killed at any moment, and here's what you do. And this is something that, you know, we who live here in the United States don't have to deal with. We don't have to have a go bag. And so that these 19 embassies that were closed, those foreign service officers and all those embassies are sitting close to their go bags in the event of a need for an evacuation. I have it about right?
They're all ready for this.
Right?
They all know it can happen.
When you arrive at a place like that, one of your first conversations is with the security people, and you talk about the local conditions and what you would be looking for and what you should probably have in your go bag for that place.
You know, this is, you know, if we look over our shoulders here, we will see the spectacle or the shadow of the whole Benghazi situation behind us. But separating ourselves from that, have the two of you experienced in your careers people that you know that you lost?
In almost every terrorist attack from the 80s on, we lost a personal friend. Somebody killed that we knew. In one of the, people may remember that time there was a Catholic church, or Christian church attacked in Islamabad. There was a mother and daughter killed. That family had served with us in Beijing. The daughter was in the grade between our two children. And we knew people in almost every attack who were killed.
Boy, it's a different way of living, and you know, maybe the difference is that in the military situation, it may be husband and wife in the line of fire potentially, but in your situation, in the foreign service, you have husband and wife and children potentially in the line of fire.
We also have unaccompanied posts, and there are some families who choose not to bring their families with them, but we figured that was our whole career. We wanted
Yeah, we want our kids to
we
be
wanted
with
to
us.
live together, and there's a lot of good things too. They learn a lot of common sense.
I bet they did. They got a level of street smarts that you wouldn't see
Her
elsewhere.
son had been around the world 5 times, literally from Pakistan back all the way around the world 5 times by the time he was 5.
Now that's some frequent flyer mileage. Is he still working off of that frequent flyer account today? All right. Well, let's talk about you know, maybe looking forward to the future a little bit, and then we'll get into some of the exciting things accomplishments that the two of you have made in your careers. But I wanted to ask you about the how does a young person get started in the Foreign Service today? How does that happen? We have somebody who's watching this program or listening to it. How do they do it? They got to know somebody?
State.gov. Go to the website, state.gov, and it tells you all about the Foreign Service. There's an interactive game you can play about the different officers, and it tells you about the process, which for a Foreign Service officer begins with an exam that you can register online for, that's free. And then there's a process that if you pass the written exam and you pass an oral exam and you have to pass a medical exam and a security exam, and then you come in.
Hear that? Just take the exam, and if you don't pass,
Try again.
try again. Try again. Okay.
I didn't pass the first time. A lot of people don't pass the first time.
Yeah, it's sort of a badge of honor to say, I had to take it 17 times.
No, he passed the first time.
Okay.
I didn't.
All right. Well, let's look at from the standpoint of a new generation coming into the Foreign Service and talking about the digital age. I mean, how do the two of you see the digital age as impacting the work of embassies when you have a situation where the real-time audio or video can be streamed back to State Department headquarters, and or you've got these drones or remote sensing devices? How is that impacted things?
In some ways, probably less than you would think, because diplomacy is a contact sport. If you're not there face to face with a person, the other person is obviously watching something on his iPad or doing something else, and you need to have that knowledge, you need to have the language skills, you need to be able to interact with people. The new IT, that's an enabler, it's not a replacement.
But let me give you an example. I was the number 2 in the U.S. Representative Office, the American Institute in Taiwan, and I got a phone call one night from Washington, from the State Department, telling me, we've just seen on CNN that there has been an airplane crash at Taipei International Airport, and what's up? What's happening? And so, boom, it was 11 o'clock, I was ready to go to bed. But I got on the phone, and basically it was us on the ground who then went out and liaised with the government, went out and identified American bodies, notified the families of the relatives, worked to see whether we were going to bring in FBI and others. It was an American airplane, to help determine the cause of the accident. So it actually, though, was things that you went and you talked to people.
So it's a press the flesh type of career.
And not just parachute in at the time of something happening, but build those relationships so people will help you to understand, and you will understand the cultural context, the history, and the background.
Well, talking about the personal relationships, what do you think? Is there a way that we can say that a resident ambassador puts his or her personal stamp on the relationships within the country to which you're assigned? Is there a trail of Jim or Lauren Moriarty left behind?
I think you basically have national interests in a country. The ambassador and his country team do their best to define those interests, do their best to convince Washington that they have a solid plan for advancing those interests, and then in effect they implement policy. They don't make the ultimate policy decisions, those are made back in Washington, but in most cases the ambassador and his or her country team will be steering Washington, advising Washington, and ending up with the best possible policy.
Okay, let's do this. Let me pose a question to you to be thinking about, and then we'll go to a break, and when we come back we'll dive into the question and subset of questions that we'll be talking about, and what I'd like the two of you to be thinking about. I mean, you've raised kids, you've had this long career. What are some of the benefits of being in the Foreign Service and career, and some of the interesting things that you've done over your lifetime? And ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We'll be back after the break with Jim and Lauren Moriarty, ambassadors both.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel. This is ThinkTech Hawaii, broadcasting live from the Pioneer Plaza in downtown Honolulu. We raise public awareness about tech, energy, and globalism in Hawaii. Technology is critical to our state. A vibrant tech sector will give us new prospects in the global marketplace and will offer great careers and make our economy more resilient. Streaming live on Ustream and Spreaker, ThinkTech allows its hosts and guests invaluable opportunities to report important events and discuss important questions, and to be heard here in Hawaii and around the world. You can find links to our live streams on thinktechhawaii.com or on our mobile website, m.thinktechhawaii.com. And you can see our archive on YouTube.
It's all just a click away. We want to do whatever we can to keep Hawaii relevant, connected, and thriving in the complexity of the 21st century. We hope you will help us in those efforts. Tune in today. This is ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidel. Mahalo.
We're back, we're live, and this is Pacific Forum's Issues and Insights. I'm David Day, and you can join the conversation here on the Wall Street Business Network by calling us at area code 808-296-5467. And we've got Hawaii's Foreign Service power couple with us in the studio here, Jim and Lauren Moriarty, both retired U.S. ambassadors. And at the break, I asked the two of you to kind of give some thought to your long and distinguished careers. And so let's talk a little bit, and we'll let ladies go first. Lauren, I know that you have a feeling in your heart now that you're retired, as you look back on this career, that you've made a difference. And but I'd like you to tell the audience, give us a couple of examples. What was it that you did in your career that made a difference?
It's from the very first tour. In my very first tour, I knew that there would be a harvest in Cambodia after the genocide of the Khmer Rouge and the Vietnamese invasion because of seed, rice seed, that I helped get into the country.
Okay, and you were based at that time
I was
where?
based in Bangkok, working at that time
Okay.
in our Khmer emergency group. And one of the things I did is I went out to the border and I talked to people, Cambodians who had come and fled
Okay.
to the border, and asked them what would they need in order to have a harvest. And basically, it turned out it was different from what we thought it would be. They needed seed, but they needed to be able to carry it because they'd killed their draft animals to eat. And they needed plows and be able to put the seed in the ground, but they needed seed. And so we presented it in a different way, and we got it there in time and got it to them for cross-border distribution, which turned out to be the easiest way to get it there and get them to take it and walk it home and plant it. And I remember the following spring, 3 journalists who'd gone into Cambodia came back, and they said there was a harvest that year.
That must be a really good, warm feeling in the heart, you know? You created the first harvest after the genocide of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia.
With some other people,
I
obviously.
understand, you know, but you had your hand in it.
I was 25 years old,
Wow.
24 years old.
So you look back
Right.
and you say, I
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Jim, what about you? Give us an example of one of the things that where you look back on and you know that you made a difference.
Well, when I arrived in Nepal, there were 145,000 refugees from Bhutan who had been living in camps in southeastern Nepal for 16 years without electricity.
For 16 years.
Yeah, and no real hope for the future. I mean, Nepal, being one of the poorest countries in the world, said we can't assimilate these people. Bhutan didn't want to take anybody back. And so myself and my embassy, we were able to really determine that, yes, a lot of these refugees would love a better life. They would love to go to a third country and maybe return to Bhutan at some point, but build new lives elsewhere. We were able to convince Washington that we should drive that process. We were able to convince the Nepali government that, yes, that's better than leaving these people in the camps. And now we have about 60,000 of these people in the United States and another 15,000 in other countries, leading normal lives, having hope for the future.
And you know, David, it also relates to U.S. interest in a different way. For example, the United States is a major donor to the UN High Commission for Refugees. We're a major donor for aid. So when you're able to help people build lives in their own countries, in their own country in Cambodia, or in their own country elsewhere, or when they're able to not be refugees but to be productive citizens, that also helps us, because then we're preventing problems.
Sure.
Instead of having to come back later because of the values we as Americans have to protect human rights and help people.
I know that the two of you have a long list of other feel-good things that you've done to know that you've made a difference. And Jim, I don't want to slight you at all, but I just want Lauren to say quick 2 sentences here on the trade deals that you helped put together. Just if you could just give the audience a...
I worked on the accessions of...
That's because I'm interested in business.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, business is good. Actually, I worked on the accessions of the People's Republic of China and Taiwan to the World Trade Organization. And what that did is it helped bring economies with billions of dollars of trade, major economies, into the world trading system. You think back, we used to have trade wars.
That's right. That's right.
Now we solve these problems basically by rules at the World Trade
And so
Organization.
basically you got them onto the playing field,
Yep.
the international
And
playing
basically opened the way for a lot of American businesses to go into China in particular.
Door openers.
Yeah.
Door openers. Let's jump now to a topic I'm dying to get to, and that is, you look back on your careers, rewards. Jim, what do you, give us a couple of quick examples here.
We were
Rewards
talking
for
about this the other day. I mean, the people we've been able to work with and get to know are amazing. You know, talking to the Dalai Lama for an hour about China policy, meeting with former President Carter, and I'm just working down my list of Nobel Prize winners I've had the chance to talk with. Talking about talking about Tibet with Jimmy Carter, Mohammed Yunus, the winner of the Nobel Prize for Grameen Bank, meeting with him 13, 14 times. The opportunities to get to know some of the best people, the brightest people that this world produces are absolutely amazing. And for a guy from a small town in Massachusetts who grew up in a blue-collar family, I'd say, yeah.
What was that town in Massachusetts, small town?
It's a town called Ware. It's my first 5 jobs were working in woolen mills. And I used to love that when I talked to the Bangladeshi owners of ready-made garment factories, is that I'm the only one in this room who's been on the floor, worked on the floor of a textile factory.
Lauren, what about you? What do you see as some of the cool rewards?
Jim talked about some of the famous people we met, but we also met just amazing, ordinary people who did amazing things. I mean, a woman who had a child who was mentally challenged, and she had no money, but she wanted to do something, and so she opens her own little school, taking in kids, and people who overcame just day-to-day challenges that most Americans could hardly imagine, and did really neat things. So I think, what you hear a lot of is about people, because really there's a lot of great stories, but at the heart of it, it's about people. It's about relationships, and it's about people.
One of the things that this conversation really strikes me is that, I want to thank the two of you for personalizing this whole foreign service, the State Department, and the role of our diplomats. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to remember this critical role that our Foreign Service plays, even though there's not as many of you as we have in our military bands. But it's a very, very important role, and to remember that at the very same time that we have this enormous stand down or shut down of these embassies in 19 cities around the world, that not around the world, in the Middle East and Africa, because that's a significant shutdown. And if you multiply your personal experiences and the value that you've created times the number of people there, boy, you can sure see that a big hole has been created and will be created if it continues.
Is there time for one last story?
There is. Let's have it.
After 9/11, I went to Tanzania, which is half Muslim, half Christian. I asked to meet with Muslim clerics, and I invited 5 for a half-hour tea, and more like 12 came, and they spent the first half hour yelling at me.
Yelling at you.
Yeah, because that's American Middle East policy.
Okay.
Fear of American being anti-Muslim. And then we started talking. And we talked for another hour, and we found lots of misunderstandings that we were able to clear up during that period. And we found lots of shared points that we could share as peoples. And those 12 community religious leaders were able to go back to their communities and share a better understanding of who we as the United States were.
And what you're really saying is that shared value and the ability to talk is now interrupted in those 19 cities, and we need to get back online. I think that's what you're really saying.
I must say I had to fight pretty hard to be able to do that meeting as well at that time.
This is because they knew they were going to yell at you?
No, they thought it was a very big security risk for me to go there and meet with them.
And it's that security risk that you took that I think a lot of people don't appreciate and don't understand. And again, Ambassadors Moriarty, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. This has been a fascinating discussion with a very troubling background as we now look at the developments spreading across the Middle East and those African cities. And let us pray that we can get those embassies reopened so that the eyes and ears are focused again on what they need to do. And, any last thoughts?
Like I said, it's a contact sport. If you're not out there having the contact, then don't be surprised if over time things start going in a bad direction. People develop misunderstandings.
My last thought is I hope somebody listening today thinks that this sounds like fun and decides to do it and carry on the next generation.
There you have it, an invitation to take the Foreign Service exam. Thank you all for joining us. We hope that you have a safe drive home, and we'll see you again next week at the same time for our Asia in Review show. Good night.